On Press Perspective today, we touch upon the annual International Film Festival in Busan and a new syndrome related to capital Seoul among young Chinese travelers. Do stay with us. Hello, welcome to Press Perspective. It's Friday, September 26th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. It's that time of the week yet again during which we surf through, if you will, a number of stories related to the broader society and on occasion, K-culture. For this, I have writer Colin Marshall here in the studio with us. Colin, it's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
I also have Chris Tharp, a contributing writer for the Telegraph, joining this session virtually. Chris, it's been ages since we last spoke. Welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
Right, we shall start with you, Chris. Let's begin with an event there in Busan that's been making quite a bit of headlines. Chris, the Busan International Film Festival comes to a close on this Friday after having hosted an elaborate event to mark its 30th birthday. Do tell us more, Chris.
Yeah, today is the closing ceremony, and it's been a great 10 days of BIFF this year. I think they celebrated the 30th anniversary in style. I've been covering it as I've covered BIFF on and on for different publications over the years. This time I've been covering it not as a film critic, I've never been a film critic, but as part of a broader travel piece on Busan as a cultural destination. So this year I was lucky, armed with a press pass to see a lot of movies, get into a lot of events, and of course hit a lot of parties. And part of what I do at BIFF is just soak up the atmosphere. You know, whether I'm rubbing elbows with a director or producer at some schwanky party on in the opening night, or just talking to, you know, regular folks who are coming to see movies and are passionate about cinema, going to BIFF for me is one of the highlights of the year. It really brings something special to Busan, because sometimes down here in Busan we feel a little neglected in the shadow of Seoul, and for 10 days of the year Busan is the most glamorous place on the Korean peninsula, perhaps the world. You know, and this year we have all sorts of A-list directors from Bong Joon-ho and Park Jang-wook, whose new movie is making a splash in Europe and elsewhere, Juliette Binoche and Guillermo del Toro, the Mexican director, and all sorts of celebrities made it out this year to celebrate the 30th anniversary in style. So I was really happy to be a part of it. As always, I've come a long ways from my early days covering it for the local English language magazine and going to parties and posting posts at 4 a.m. So I'm glad that they still let me in, and I hope that BIFF continues to be this wonderful institution here in Busan.
Right, I am so envious of that. All right, Colin, the French media claims the Busan Film Gala shares the strength of Asian cinema. What do you believe is this strength?
Yes, first I'm sorry to say that I've missed 30 Busan International Film Festivals in a row. One of these years I will get over there. It's unfortunate because Korean film was a big part of why I became interested in Korea in the first place. But yes, this is a question I've thought about much as well, the sort of power or the appeal, the allure of Asian cinema. And this article was in France 24, the French media sort of global arm, much like Arirang. And the quote was specifically from a filmmaker who has a pen name or a nom de guerre, Kogo Nara. He's a Korean American, actually, born in Korea, raised in the US, and he made a big splash with a film I liked very much called Columbus a few years ago, and he's now on the jury. He was on the jury at the Busan Film Festival. And he, I think, in his movies, which are all American in one sense or another, has tried to infuse what I think he would describe, because it's his quote, as an Asian sensibility. And what might that mean? Well, to my mind, part of it is a willingness to break with the strictures of genre convention as you would see in Hollywood movies. Now, Hollywood movies do a very good job of adhering to their genres, you know, being the most action movie you can ever see, or, you know, the most romantic comedy you could ever watch. Maybe that's a dated reference now. Rom-coms are kind of gone by the roadside. But in any case, for me, and when I was growing up as a sort of cinephile or becoming a cinephile, I was drawn in many ways more to Asian cinema more broadly. Then I had plenty of favorite US directors and European directors, but somehow I kept returning to the Japanese ones, to Hong Kong filmmakers, Taiwanese, and later Korean filmmakers as well. And I was just thinking about this yesterday when I was seeing the new film that Chris referenced, 어쩔 수가 없다, or No Other Choice, I believe it is, the new Park Chan-wook film. And he did this film, Park Chan-wook, with the big star. What's the guy's? It's slipping my mind.
Lee Byung-hun.
Lee Byung-hun, yes, there we go. He's so big, his name isn't coming to me. This was a reunion for them. They did the film Joint Security Area in 2000, which was the first Korean film I ever saw, in fact. So seeing the new movie, No Other Choice, I was reminded, hey, this also has something of that, what I would think of as the appeal of Asian cinema, in that it is a genre film in some respect. You could call it a black comedy, but it does mix in a very wide emotional and aesthetic range. It has a greater range in one film than you would expect or even be allowed to accomplish in Hollywood. And ironically, this new film is being praised very highly. It's been being given extreme praise in the West. In Korea, the reviews are not quite so good. So in a way, that aspect of Asian cinema may be more beloved outside at least this part of Asia right now.
Right. Chris, foreign media coverage of the latest Busan Film Fiesta also included commentary about the challenges faced by the South Korean movie industry. What appeared to be the main challenges, Chris? I mean, you have clarified earlier on that you're not a movie critic, but based on your rubbing of shoulders, elbows with the big names there in Busan, what have you been hearing?
Yeah, this certainly came up. And of course, at the festival, you wouldn't know it because it looked like cinema was alive and well and very healthy, but that you're only getting one piece of the puzzle, aren't you? You know, that's the party they have every year. But when it comes to the day-to-day realities economically of Korean cinema, the signs aren't so good right now. I mean, artistically, they've reached some great heights, but right now what we have is dropping attendance. You know, people aren't just going to the cinema like they used to. People are staying home and, you know, watching streaming. And I know that's true with myself and my wife. Most of the films we watch are, you know, on our couch with our dogs and, you know, and some chicken that we ordered in. It's pretty rare that we go to the cinema, or I go to the cinema pretty much, see a couple films a year, and I'll attend the festival. And there's numbers to back this up. According to the Korean Film Council, attendance was down by 32.5% over the first half of 2025. That's a pretty big drop. And of course, they blame this on streaming platforms, which keep us at home, and also just the dwindling amount of choices. They're just not making as many films. There's shrinking production. Also, there's soaring costs of making movies. It's cheaper to make a film in Korea, which has fed some of the production here, than, of course, in the States, where it's prohibitively expensive. But it's still not cheap, and it's getting more expensive every day. And another big thing, which a lot of people don't realize, is brain drain is a big problem. A lot of the new talent, a lot of the directors and the screenwriters who would be the new Park Chan-wook, the new auteur for Korean cinema, a lot of these guys and folks, they are not going into movie making. Instead, they're, again, attracted to streaming services and television. As Korean dramas, I think, are doing very well. But so some of the top tier talent that would otherwise be the next generation of filmmakers is going into a kind of the more lucrative work, where it's easier to make money and it's easier to get your projects done. So when you combine all of this, it's kind of a dark cloud on Korean cinema. But I think these trends are probably worldwide. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I think generally, perhaps not in India, but certainly in Western countries, people are not attending the cinema like they're used to. And this is a problem. But of course, what are the prospects of going forward? The new BIFF director, Jung Han-sok, who takes the chair after 2 years of absence, where we had no director at BIFF, he says he's optimistic. He says a film festival like BIFF provides an opportunity that can inspire audiences and hopefully get them coming to the theater. And perhaps he's right, but I think it's probably a case of a drop of water in the bucket, where we will see a downward trend of in-person movie attendance. But that doesn't mean cinema will die, but I think it's going to have to evolve it's not going to be the behemoth it once was.
Right. Well, perhaps fully aware of the situation here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung, he spoke about support for the film industry here in the country upon his visit to the Busan Film Festival with First Lady Kim Hye-kyung. Could you tell us a bit more about the significance of such government support, Colin?
Yes, the first couple were right there in the audience. I'm not sure what movies they saw. They probably saw the new Park Chan-wook, I'll tell you that. This is an event. I mean, my wife and I have newborn twins at home, but we went out to the theater because you have to see the new Park Chan-wook movie. I mean, he is one of the filmmakers who is 21st century Korean cinema. But yes, government support for the Korean film industry is not something entirely new, of course, although this is not so much discussed these days, but Korean cinema did benefit from different forms of support early on, most notably the screen quota system, which mandated that theaters in Korea had to show a certain number of Korean productions in order to qualify to play Hollywood movies, or any foreign movies, but in effect, in practice, Hollywood movies. So this system had its downsides. There were a lot of so-called quota quickies made in the 70s and 80s just to get the rights to play Hollywood movies that would make money. I kind of like some of these quota quickies from the 70s and 80s, to be honest. You know, they have their appeal, they have their charm, they're not without it. But at some point, the Korean film grew and prospered to the extent that it didn't need really the screen quota system. It could hold its own, and still can in many respects. But people do forget, or maybe never knew at this point, how important Korean cinema was to the Korean wave before it was called that, the pre-Hallyu, especially in the West. The rest of Asia too, but in the West, before any Westerner had ever seen K-drama or heard K-pop or knew those words, many had seen Korean films, especially if they were cinephiles. Those were the ones, the festival goers knew that Korean cinema by Park Chan-wook and other filmmakers, Lee Chang-dong, Kim Ki-duk, Hong Sang-soo, this was something new and something more interesting than most other national cinematic cultures were putting out at the time. And again, Busan Film Festival, 30 years old now, that's about the time frame we're talking about. Back in the 90s was when everything really began happening for Korean film internationally. But we do have to ask, would this have happened if not for the support the film industry was receiving? So potentially, because there is this precedent, maybe whatever Lee Jae-myung plans to do will have a positive effect. We don't know that much, I think, about the specifics about his plans, but I'm sure it won't be nothing, and the effect won't be nothing. But I think we're in a different situation than the 90s, as I think Chris alluded to. You know, in the 90s, no Netflix, no streaming. There was plenty of entertainment around. You know, there was cable TV and all that, but cinema held a larger mind share. It held a larger share of popular culture. And in the 90s, South Korea was maybe the most cinephilic country in the world. It had the most cinematically engaged public in the world, the most film publications, magazines per capita, and Korea brought in more films from the rest of the world too than most other countries. So that did a lot to help as well, not just government policy, but also just a film-loving public. And there still is one in Korea, but without that kind of public enthusiasm, I do wonder how much government aid can accomplish on a short time frame.
Right, I suppose we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, hopefully you'll get a chance to see the Busan Film Festival when it celebrates its 31st birthday next year.
Well, before the 40th, perhaps.
Right, we'll fingers crossed. Colin, moving forward. According to South Korean media outlets, a growing number of young Chinese travelers to South Korea are reportedly suffering from something called the Seoul syndrome. Could you first begin by telling us a bit about this so-called illness?
Yes, Seoul syndrome, which brought to mind at first this idea of Paris syndrome, which is a sort of old concept dating to the days when Japanese tourists were many in the world, and they would idealize Paris, they would romanticize Paris at home, and then visit the actual Paris and find themselves beset with these psychological syndromes triggered by the disorder, the dirt, as the Japanese saw it compared to their ideal, everything that felt wrong or dangerous or unclean about Paris compared to their pristine, romanticized mental image. Seoul syndrome is the opposite. It's rather the opposite. It's Chinese tourists, young Chinese tourists, the sort of equivalent of the MZ generation, so-called in Korea, come to Korea, they stay in Seoul for a while, maybe they study, maybe they live here for a year or two, and they go back to China and they feel this sorrow, or they're beset with this depression almost, because they're comparing what they experienced in Seoul to their lives back in China, which the surroundings might not be so orderly. The people might not be as friendly to their minds. They say much about the cleanliness of the air, which is ironic because when I moved to Korea, the thing everybody wanted to warn me off about. So, oh, the air is terrible there. You don't want try not to breathe when you live in Korea. But these Chinese people, these young Chinese people come, and the air is one of these great things that they miss when they go back to China. So this is, yes, a phenomenon of comparison, certainly, and to an extent, everybody, when they go on vacation, they return to their normal lives, and they think, oh, you know, if only I were back where I didn't have to work, right? I mean, this is about vacationing to an extent, but as well, ironically, sadly, and this has been covered in the Korean press, this happens at the same time as Koreans are traveling to China more themselves. So Koreans are going to China more, just as Chinese are coming to Korea more. And so you have this mutual, I don't know if there's any sort of Beijing, or not, maybe not Beijing, Shanghai syndrome that goes on with Koreans, but I think the interest is mutual. And with a new visa being, not a visa-free travel program being introduced very soon for Chinese, we're going to be hearing a lot more Chinese spoken on the streets of Seoul. I mean, we're already hearing a lot. That's the main foreign language on the streets, but it'll be even mainer, I suspect, soon.
Right, and staying with that, Chris, what can you tell us about the response from the Chinese media with regard to the so-called Seoul syndrome among young Chinese travelers as shared on their social media platforms, of course?
Well, as you can expect, some of the responses in the Chinese media have been quite skeptical. When the phrase Korean media verifies Chinese have soul sickness came up, a lot of users responded by they think that it's actually Koreans on the internet trying to like make this a viral sensation, that it's a self-promotion sort of syndrome on behalf of Koreans to promote their own country and to perhaps make China look bad. But other people in the media have been more sympathetic. The fact that we're even hearing about it means that this is a thing, because whether it's Weibo or Xiaohongshu, the two main social media platforms in China, the content is quite controlled. So the fact that we're having this conversation in a foreign country about what's going on social media in China means that people are legitimately expressing these feelings. So it is a real thing.
Right. Colin, what do you suppose is the appeal of Seoul among these young Chinese travelers? I know you hate to speculate.
I don't know if I hate to speculate, but it brings to mind another conversation I had long ago with some Europeans. I was asking about why do so many Europeans romanticize America so much? Like, why is there such a strong interest in American culture? I mean, I understood that there were some good things about it, but coming from the US, I couldn't really get it. And so someone said to me, they said this, for us, it's like we're stepping right into a movie. We've seen America in the movies all our lives, and TV and everything else. So it's like actually being able to walk into a movie or a television show. It's just like that. You drive, you rent your car, you do a road trip, and it's like you're in a movie. And this was, he said it so definitively, so without doubt, like this is the reason. There are other reasons, I'm sure, but I understood that. And I'm sure with Chinese or other people from other Asian countries as well, they've seen so much of Korea in recent years. There are, I'm sure, many, many K-drama watchers in China, enthusiasts of Korean cinema in China. They've got so much of a heavy dose of it that when they come here, it's real. This place is real. This place I've seen. Maybe it's not just like what I've seen in the media, but it's pretty close. And so if you have a kind of fantasy, the similarities between what you see around you in Seoul and what you've seen leading up to that point will make it all the more vivid. So I think that's a part of it. They're stepping into what they've just seen on a screen, and that can be a pretty intoxicating experience, I suspect.
Right. Chris, tomorrow, that is September 27th, I believe, is World Tourism Day. Speaking within your capacity, Chris, as an established travel writer, what is your assessment of South Korea's tourism industry as we speak?
This is a good question because it's been on my mind because I recently filed article with the Telegraph on this very subject because people are curious. Eyes are on Korea because the tourism industry is booming here. Nothing short of that would really describe it. For example, in 2024, South Korea welcomed over 16 million tourists, and that's a 48.4% increase than in 2023. And this is the biggest jump recorded on the globe out of any country. So we see that South Korea is very hot. It's been hot for a while, post-pandemic and pre-pandemic as well. In fact, we're still not quite matching the pre-pandemic numbers, but I suspect this year if everything goes on plan, they're projected to see perhaps over 20 million tourists. And a lot of this has to do with the, the viral sensation of the K-pop Demon Hunters, this movie on Netflix. It's the biggest successful movie on the platform in the platform's history. And evidently, ever since they released this thing in June, there has been a big spike in plane ticket reservations to come to South Korea. So that alone has moved the needle. And so when we see the cumulative effect of Hallyu, of the Korean wave around the world, films to a degree, but especially K-pop, and dramas are really doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now. A lot of people watch these dramas and come to South Korea because they want to visit the sets, or they want to go to a pojangmatcha and nurse a glass of soju like they saw their favorite actor do in the K-drama. So it's the media output and the pop culture output is having a massive effect on tourism. It's bringing people here, and the numbers just speak for themselves. So I think it will continue to increase, and the only thing that I can hope for is that Korea doesn't suffer some of the effects of over-tourism that we're seeing in Europe and even in Japan these days.
Right, that is something to keep in mind, Chris. Thank you for that. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Chris, as always, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Colin, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, that is all the time we have for this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.